Hello and welcome back to DCS How to Fly, the series where I teach you the basics of certain aircraft in DCS 1.5. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at the basics of the SU-25, the aircraft package with Flaming Cliffs 3, not to be confused with the SU-25T, which comes with the game as freeware. For the first time today, I'm not going to be going over the key bindings required, as I've covered them all in my previous videos regarding the American aircraft, so you can simply transfer the binds over. With that out of the way, let's get started. We'll start off with the startup procedure. Whilst most of the startup is identical to that of the aircraft we've already looked at, there are a few slight changes. The biggest change in the layout of the SU-25T is the lack of HUD. All of the information the pilot needs is displayed on the instruments instead of a HUD, so a much more traditional approach to flying is required. To begin with, turn on the electrics, followed by the cockpit and navigation lights. The navigation lights have two modes, static and flashing. Pressing the hotkey once activates the static mode, twice and the lights will begin to flash, and a third time will turn the lights off completely. After switching the lights onto your desired mode, close the canopy and start the engines. Unlike the A-10 and F-15 and other American aircraft, the SU-25 allows for both engines to be started simultaneously, reducing the time it takes to get off the ground, especially in a scramble. Once both engines have reached 38% RPM, the aircraft may begin to roll forward under its own thrust, regardless of whether you've opened the throttle or not. This is perfectly normal, so don't treat it as an issue with your controller or the aircraft itself. Lastly, press the 8 key on your keyboard to activate the quote-unquote HUD. It appears on the ASP glass in front of you, which we'll talk about more in the next video. While not strictly speaking a HUD, it does prove useful during the flight. Now that we're up and running, we can begin our taxi to the runway. The hydraulics and landing gear on the SU-25 are very spongy, and the aircraft rolls considerably when turning on the ground, even more than an aircraft like the F-15. As a result, it is advised that you keep the speed below 20 km an hour when turning to avoid damaging the wings and the landing gear. Once you have taxied to the edge of the runway, hold short and request permission to take off. When granted, move onto the runway, deploy the takeoff flaps and throttle up to around 90% RPM. Never use full throttle on takeoff unless you have a very heavy load. Once you're rolling, hold the stick 2/3 of the way back and wait for the nose of the aircraft to lift off the ground, followed by the rear wheels. As soon as you're off the ground, retract the gear and wait for the speed to climb to around 250 km an hour before retracting the flaps. Once you're in the air, you can increase the throttle all the way to gain some more speed, if you haven't already. Now that we're airborne, we can talk about the characteristics of the SU-25. To start off with, its role as a close air support aircraft results in a lack of manoeuvrability, so the aircraft is not suited for dogfighting unless necessary. If you do come under fire, speed is your advantage, or rather your lack of speed. Despite that the SU-25 is faster than its main rival, the A-10, it still doesn't have the ability to go any faster than 450 to 500 knots, which you should use to your advantage. If engaged by other, faster aircraft, simply deploy the air brakes and zero the throttle. Drop a couple of flares and wait for the threat to speed past, giving you the opportunity to escape or engage. Lastly, the SU-25 can be easily seen due to the substantial amount of smoke the engines throw out at high RPM. To cope with this problem, you can either use less throttle at the cost of speed, seek cloud cover to get on top of, or head for the deck and try and blend in with the darker surface of the ground. Finally, we move on to the landing procedure. To begin with, fly parallel to the runway at an altitude of around 2 km until you can no longer see the runway by looking at the back of your canopy. At this point, slowly bank away from the runway and reduce the throttle to around 15%. Once you are perpendicular to the runway, bank in the opposite direction, deploy the air brakes, zero the throttle, radio ATC and begin your descent. Point your aircraft at the runway threshold once you have permission to land, extend your flaps and lower the gear to begin your final approach. Smooth, small inputs are the name of the game here. The SU-25 tends to have a delayed reaction to sharp movements, which will land you in serious trouble or the sea. An ideal speed for your final approach is 225 km an hour, but the SU-25 does not slow down well in a dive, even a shallow one, so be sure to make your approach long and level, unlike I did. Touchdown doesn't have to be on the runway threshold. The SU-25 slows down relatively quickly with the aid of a drag chute, so don't force the aircraft onto the ground. Wait for it to drop out of the sky. Once on the ground, deploy the drag chute and wait for the speed to drop below 100 km/h before using the wheel brakes, making sure to use them in small bursts to prevent overheating and punctures. Taxi to the parking area and shut your aircraft down. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe for more. Why not check out my other DCS content? And finally, I apologise for the long wait on this video. It has been a long time since I last uploaded anything on the channel, let alone DCS. I have been in exam mode for the last 2 months, unfortunately. I've just been inundated with exam after exam, so there has been absolutely no time to record, edit, do anything like this. So I want to thank you all for sticking around. Thanks for not deserting me, I suppose I could say. But now that I'm clear of exams, uploads should return to normal, and we will be hopefully uploading at an increased rate in some places. I will post an update video hopefully soon, trying to explain what I'm going to try and do with this series and how I'm going to finish it off. But for now, I will continue with the DCS uploads, hopefully every couple of days. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ra.